War of the Worlds, The Resurrection. A novel by J.M. Dillard. Chapter 22. A full moon shone eerily above the remote expanse of desert. Traveling with its headlights off, the 18-wheeler slowed as it approached the gate. Posted along the 9-foot-high, seemingly endless chain-link fence were warnings. Danger. Nuclear testing site. Keep out. Along with yellow and black radioactive fallout symbols. The truck groaned to a halt, and a Delta Squad soldier leapt out. He ripped away the chains securing the gate with an easy, fluid motion, then swung the gate open and let the big rig through. It rumbled past, then stopped again to give the soldier time to close the gate and hop up into the cab. The rig began moving again. It drove through miles of lifeless, rocky desert and tumbleweed, past a rise where a shelter was built into the ground so that those inside could witness the above-ground detonations that had occurred here some 30-odd years before. The rig continued a few more miles, until it reached a ramshackle hangar that was used these days as a makeshift toxic waste dump. The soldier jumped down from the cab and slid the hangar door open wide. The truck pulled inside. All that remained now was to unload the contents of the trailer and convey them to their permanent base, whose existence they had learned of from their Delta Squad hosts. A cavern deep beneath the desert surface, created by an underground nuclear blast. A place where no living human would dare to venture. "I am here at your request, Advocacy," Khashran said humbly, though he burned with anger at what he perceived to be betrayal. He stood in the dark belly of the cavern. Before him, the three comprising the Advocacy reclined in their human forms against a ledge hewn from the rock. Prior to the summons, Khashran had been supervising the release of the last of his soldiers from the barrels, and silently planning his strategy against Khor and his followers. As Khashran's inferior, Khor was morally bound to keep silent of the Supreme Commander's plan, for he was sworn to protect his Supreme Commander with one exception, if the Commander harmed a member of the ruling class. Since Khashran had not yet committed the deed or even stated that he intended to do so, Khor could bring no charge against him, but was free to take what measures he could to protect the Advocacy, which was clearly what Khor was doing now as he and another member of his unit stood, armed with the human soldiers' firearms, guarding the three. Khashran had expected as much, and did not fault Khor for doing so. But the fact that the Advocacy had summoned him, Khashran decided meant that Khor had broken his oath of loyalty, and had told the Advocacy that Khashran was plotting their murders. Perhaps such treachery should not have surprised him, for, in the event of Khashran's death, Khor, also a brilliant military strategist, was most likely to be chosen by consensus to be the new Supreme Commander. It was Khana, back again in her human form, who replied first. Khashran carefully noted her expression, her movements, the cadence of her speech, but could detect no anxiety, no fear there. Only the faintest hint of warning. "We have called you, Khashran," Khana said, "because we wish to discuss a problem." Horek, using a gesture borrowed from his host brain, nodded. "Khor has informed us that there is a plot among some in the military to harm the Advocacy. This, of course, cannot be tolerated." Khashran looked at them and said nothing. Oshar spoke. "Therefore, we require your assistance. Speak to your soldiers, Khashran. Rally them together. Khor has suggested we commence battle against Earth as soon as possible, in order to unite the military. Oshar has used the primitive transmission equipment to activate the homing beacons on our vessels. We have already located one triad of ships nearby, and so we have already informed the Council of our intent to retrieve them tomorrow." Tomorrow? Khashran took a step forward, relieved that Khor had kept silent as to the instigator of the unrest, yet disturbed by Oshar's words. "Advocates, my people are recovering from their long sleep, and the others from the last battle with the humans. My co-pilot, Konar, was injured. I cannot go to battle without a member of my triad." "Then find another co-pilot," Horik said flatly. "We will tolerate no delays." Khashran struggled to find his fury. "Tolerate no delays, will you, Horik? This is the same brand of idiot haste that almost killed us once before." And at the same time, Khashran was bitterly disappointed. He could not refuse to lead his men into battle. Yet there was no time to organize an uprising against the advocacy so quickly. Khor was truly clever. He knew that when ordered to do battle, Khashran would concern himself with seeing to it that his soldiers were prepared, and would do nothing rash, such as risk a number of them in a fight against supporters of the advocacy, to jeopardize the success of the mission, or his soldiers' welfare. "Very well," he said. "Perhaps Konar will be sufficiently recovered by tomorrow to serve with me." He paused. "But I would like to discuss one concern, if possible." "Speak," Khana told him. "If we retrieve 3 ships, it would be best to do so using the cover of human host bodies." "Agreed," Horik allowed. "However, flying 3 ships will require a minimum of 21 soldiers. We have but 17, excluding the 3 host bodies occupied by your advocacy." "You may have this body if you require it," Khana said. Horik and Oshar were not so generous. Horik scowled at him. "Then you must go find more, Commander, along with a means of getting into the military installation where our ships are held. You can consult the human soldiers' minds, and as always we rely on your talent for strategy." Khashran bowed his head. "Thank you, Advocacy," he replied stiffly, and promised himself that he would deal with Khor and the Advocacy as soon as his mission was accomplished. Harrison stood in front of the open door of his house and was assaulted by the smell of rotten banana peel, a less than subtle reminder that he hadn't been home enough lately to take out the garbage. And more than that greeted him. On the foyer tile lay a pale pink envelope. He felt a surge of hopefulness. Shar. For a moment he forgot all that had happened, remembered only that he missed her and wanted to bury his face in her soft, perfumed hair. He bent down to pick up the envelope. It was addressed in Shar's oversized, elegant calligraphy, in violet ink, to H. Blackwood. Crap. Not a good sign. With sour disappointment, he recalled their last few encounters. Always quick to forgive and forget hurts. And he kept making the mistake of assuming that everyone else was like him. Clearly it wasn't the case with Charlotte. There was something heavy sliding around inside the envelope. His house key. Damn it, I don't need this right now. He slipped it, unopened, into his shirt pocket. He'd pack first and read the letter later tonight, after they got to where they were going. "All clear," Ironhorse called from inside, and Harrison walked into the living room. The colonel had insisted on securing the area before permitting Harrison into his own house. Harrison tolerated it with faint amusement, but at the same time he wondered just how long he and Ironhorse could work together without coming to blows. For now, his ultra-military approach to everything was something to make fun of, After a while, it was bound to become aggravating in the extreme. Iron Horse no doubt thought the same thing about him. He walked past the colonel without looking at him, into the bedroom, and dug 3 bags, 1 suitcase and 2 shapeless nylon tote bags, out of the closet, threw them on the bed, and stared at them. Now, what did you pack when you didn't know where you were going, and you had no idea how long you were going to stay? He finally emptied his underwear and sock drawer into the suitcase, then pulled every clean pair of pants from the closet and packed them in too. By the time he stuffed his shirts in, the suitcase was full, and he pressed hard on it to get it snapped shut. His ditty bag was in one of the nylon bags, and he gazed at it. Only enough toiletries for a weekend, really. Iron Horse stuck his scowling face into the bedroom. At the sight of him, Harrison asked, "Hey, just how long are we going to be there?" "As long as it takes to stop them," Iron Horse said grimly. "Could be weeks, could be months." Harrison nodded and picked the bag up, intending to head for the bathroom, but the colonel blocked the doorway and thrust an overstuffed white plastic garbage bag at Harrison like an accusation. "Which way to the dumpster?" Harrison backed away from the rotten odor. "You don't have to do that." Iron Horse's gaze was dangerous. "I do. I have orders from Wilson to see to your well-being. If you leave for 3 months and come back, this thing will be lethal. Besides, the damn thing is gassing me out." Fighting an urgent need to hold his nose, Harrison pointed, "Out the back door and hang a right. It's at the end of the walkway." Iron Horse disappeared immediately. Harrison called after him, "You know, when this is over, I could really use someone to come in twice a week." The back door slammed in response. He went to the bathroom and threw extra toiletries into the bag. Shaving cream, toothpaste, shampoo. By the time he went back into the bedroom, he realized he had packed everything except the most important stuff, back at the Institute. He sat warily on the bed and looked around. He wouldn't miss the little house, it was just a place to sleep, but leaving the Institute was going to be rough. He became consciously aware of the letter in his pocket. It seemed to press against his chest with tangible weight. For an instant, he struggled against the impulse to pull it from his pocket and read it, then yielded. He tore it open and shook it so that the key dropped into his hand, then put the key in his pocket and slid the neatly folded page from the envelope. It took him a second to work up the courage to unfold it, even though the key already told him what he wanted to know.
"Harrison."
No dear or anything? Damn, she was mad.
"Am returning your key. Mail me mine. If you show in person this time, I will call the police."
That was it. Not even a signature. Mostly he felt numb, but under the layer of numbness was an undeniable hurt. Impossible to believe that she could really stop loving him. Turn it off like the kitchen faucet. Because he didn't make enough money. Refused to make enough money. He let the letter drop into his lap and picked up a framed photograph on the nightstand. It was a picture of himself and Shar mugging for the camera at some party or other, Harrison in a tuxedo with his index fingers hooked into the corners of his mouth, pulling it into a wide, gaping grin while his tongue hung out. Shar self-consciously photogenic, wearing that tolerant smile of hers. He stared at her, his feelings oddly mixed. He hated her for misleading him, letting him think she loved him for himself. And at the same time, he loved her, or at least the person he thought she had been. Funny, bright, carefree, all the things he pretended to be and knew he could never really be because of the burden bequeathed him by Clayton and his parents. Clayton, at least, Harrison mused ironically, would be glad to hear about the breakup. Iron Horse appeared in the doorway again and nodded at the suitcases on the floor. "All set?" Harrison nodded and set the photo back on the nightstand. "Yeah, but we'll need to stop by the Institute. There are 1,000 things there I need." "It's taken care of." But those things are more important than anything here, Harrison protested. I need my instrument. Iron Horse silenced him with a bronze hand. I said, it's all taken care of, Doctor. He crossed the room to pick up the suitcase and one of the bags. On his way out, he paused to glance at the photograph of Shar. Pretty lady. Yeah, Harrison said dully, sliding the letter back inside the envelope. He was about to put it back into his pocket, but changed his mind and set it down next to the picture. Where he was going, he wouldn't be needing either of them. The station wagon threaded its way behind the Bronco, which was packed so full Suzanne couldn't make out the 3 men inside, only suitcases pressing Norton's chair against the rear windshield. The Bronco kicked up so much dust on the unpaved road, she had the windows rolled up and the vent turned on. In the front seat, Deb leaned against the passenger door, sourly watching the landscape roll by, right elbow on the armrest, cheek against her hand. If she withdrew any further, Suzanne decided, she would fall right out the door. All right, Suzanne said calmly, trying to play the rational adult. A real challenge at this point. Her eyes were burning with fatigue, and an hour ago, her rumbling stomach communicated to her that in her excitement she had neglected to eat anything that day. You can stop pouting now, Miss McCullough. I'm not pouting, Debbie muttered into her hand. How much longer? Suzanne sighed. I don't know. They didn't tell me. I'm not enjoying this any more than you, Deb. Why do we have to move? Deb whined, sitting up. They already moved us once. Isn't that enough? It's only for a little while. There were times such as this one when Suzanne wished she could explain everything to Debbie, so she could understand the urgent necessity of her mother's absences, of the second move. Yet, at the same time, Suzanne felt relief that the project's secrecy precluded her from telling Deb about the aliens. So young, she thought, glancing over at her daughter's sullen face. She deserves to stay a kid a little while longer. Deb, you know this is secret work, like the work I did in Ohio, except that this project is even more secret and important. She paused, trying to decide whether or not her next remark would frighten Deb, then went ahead anyway. We're going to a place because we have to be protected. It's important that no one find out what we're doing. The girl's eyes brightened a bit. You mean like foreign spies? Feeling triumphant, Suzanne shrugged nonchalantly and kept her eyes on the Bronco. Something like that. I can't say exactly, of course. Ooh, neat. Deb settled back, looking somewhat satisfied. The Russians are after my mom. I didn't say that, and remember, it's top secret. You can trust me. Deb scrutinized her mother's face carefully. So that's why I couldn't stay in school? Suzanne said noncommittally. You'll have a private tutor here. That's nice. Deb sighed and nestled her cheek against her hand again. But I already miss Kim and Mrs. Pennyworth. Her blue eyes suddenly began to cloud up. It's for the best, chicken, Suzanne soothed. Maybe you'll make some new friends where we're going. Debbie turned her face toward the window again. I hate making new friends. She rode the rest of the way without speaking. How much farther? Harrison asked as he navigated the Bronco down the uneven dirt road. If they kept going much longer, he would have to ask Iron Horse to take the wheel before he nodded off. The colonel leaned forward in the back seat to answer. We're almost there. Thank God I might make it. Amen, Norton echoed next to him in the front seat. My ass is sure tired of this bumpy road. Harrison frowned at him. Quit complaining. You didn't spend the night being chased by aliens. Besides, I thought your ass didn't feel much of anything. Norton lifted a humorously scornful brow at him. Typical scientist doesn't recognize figurative language when he hears it. Iron Horse shifted in the back seat, apparently uncomfortable with the direct reference to Norton's handicap. Harrison smiled faintly to himself. Maybe sometime around Norton would loosen him up. I know relocating is inconvenient, the colonel said, but it's only short-term until we've neutralized the problem. Norton glanced over his shoulder at Iron Horse. I like the way this man talks. In fact, my ass is feeling better already. Harrison, you feeling any better? Harrison grinned. As a matter of fact, he was, and the closer he drew to their destination, the better he felt. He might even risk 3 or 4 hours of sleep tonight. A whole lot better, Norton. Thank you for asking. He looked up in the rearview mirror at the colonel's stern but puzzled face. What makes you think neutralizing... Gee, I like that word. The aliens will be that easy, especially after what we saw last night. Iron Horse's expression shifted to that of someone who knew he wasn't being taken seriously, yet at the same time knew he was right. You saw what they did to my men, Blackwood. I don't care how many of those things are out there. Without their ships or their weapons, they don't have a chance. We'll track them down and kill them. If you don't mind, I'll just stick with tracking, Norton said softly. The colonel frowned at him. If you're not prepared to take this operation seriously, Mr. Drake... Oh man, I'm serious. Norton's brown eyes widened innocently. Whatever made you think I wasn't serious? I'm always serious. Harrison, tell the man just how serious I am. Straight-faced, Harrison said, When it comes to keeping that unfeeling ass of his safe, Norton is very serious. Serious, Norton intoned solemnly, is my middle name. Norton Sirius Drake. Iron Horse shook his head, disgusted, and raised a muscular arm to point at a barely visible dirt path. This is it. Harrison steered the Bronco left onto the path, then minutes later pulled to a stop before a closed electric gate. Very impressive, now what? In answer, the colonel removed a small remote control from his shirt pocket and punched a combination into the number pad. The gate swung open. Welcome to federal government property number 348, a.k.a. the ranch. Without proper authority, no one comes in. Harrison drove the Bronco past the gate, checking in the outside rear view to make sure Suzanne followed. She did, and behind her the gate closed automatically. Iron Horse continued, And no one gets out. Harrison blinked, trying to focus his weary eyes. He wasn't sure what he'd expected, but it certainly hadn't been this. Sprawled out on the rolling grassland lay an honest-to-God ranch. A graciously imposing manorial house, freshly whitewashed, sat in front of wooden stables that opened onto a huge fenced-in corral, complete with a horse, which paused in the midst of munching hay to eye the newcomers. Harrison emitted a low whistle. Not bad. It's landed gentry time, Norton said approvingly. Seriously speaking, Colonel, I think I could get used to this. Oh, Debbie breathed worshipfully, her nose and hands pressed against the car window. You didn't tell me about a horse. I didn't know about a horse, Suzanne frowned. She had never been near an animal that size, and wasn't so sure she liked the idea of Deb getting close to one. She pulled the wagon to a stop behind the Bronco. Besides, I thought you hated making new friends. Oh, Mom, Deb groaned, meaning surely you knew better than to take the remark seriously. Be careful, Suzanne warned, but Deb was already out of the car and dashing toward the corral. Deb ran right up to the fence and called out to the handsome chestnut-colored animal, who, much to Suzanne's relief, remained at a respectable distance, studying her warily as he took another mouthful of hay. Satisfied that her daughter was in no imminent danger, Suzanne opened up the back of the station wagon and started to unload luggage. A familiar voice came from the porch. "Leave those, Suzanne. Tom and the Colonel can take care of them for you." She looked up and gasped. Mrs. Pennyworth stood smiling on the front porch, the usual braid wound round her head, and wearing the usual jeans and Reeboks. She was wiping her hands on a yellow plaid dish towel, as if she'd just come from the kitchen. "Mrs. Pennyworth? How on earth—" The Dutchwoman's smile went from welcoming to mysterious.
"Ephraim said you'd be needing someone to tutor Deborah and to cook."
"But you were sitting with Deb only a few hours before we started packing." Come to think of it, Mrs. Pennyworth had been the only babysitter on the list Jacoby had given her. No wonder the woman had never questioned Suzanne's constant emergencies.
"You might say this is my home away from home,"
the older woman said enigmatically.
"So there was no need for me to spend any time packing."
Debbie came wandering back, looking frustrated by her inability to establish communications with the horse.
"He's awfully shy."
She broke off at the sight of Mrs. Pennyworth and sped like a bullet toward the porch. Her hug was so enthusiastic Mrs. Pennyworth staggered backward a step.
"Mrs. Pennyworth, how did you get here?"
Mrs. Pennyworth hugged back, dish towel in hand.
"Well, I explained to your mother's employer that I was good friends with you, and so I had to come along. Besides, I heard you needed a teacher." "That's great."
Deb stepped back and gazed wistfully in the direction of the corral.
"This place won't be so bad after all." "And here is Mr. Thomas Kensington." Mrs. Pennyworth gestured at the man approaching from the direction of the stables. Dressed in riding breeches, suede jacket, and a felt hat, Kensington was gray-haired, lean, and walked with a slight limp. As he joined the group, he nodded unsmiling at them. "Thomas Kensington," he said rather stiffly. "Thomas is responsible for the maintenance of everything here,"
Mrs. Pennyworth said. She was apparently the only one not taken aback by the man's cold demeanor.
"The house, the grounds, and Deborah will be interested to know the stables. He is the owner of the horse, Spirit." "Oh, Mr. Kensington?"
Debbie fastened her adoring gaze on him.
"Please, could you teach me how to ride?"
Kensington coughed nervously and shrugged. "I think that depends on your mother and Mrs. Pennyworth, young lady." Suzanne sighed.
"If it's all right with everyone else, I suppose it's all right with me."
Mrs. Pennyworth nodded.
"So long as you finish your lessons first."
She gestured with the dish towel at Harrison and the others as they approached.
"Is anyone here hungry? I have a roast with potatoes and carrots in the oven."
And at the grateful sounds of appreciation that followed, Mrs. Pennyworth smiled.
"Come in, then, so we can all get acquainted."